Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Run Life Today. I'm Mickey Moore, your host. Glad to be here with another one of our wonderful community members, Bryan Desloge. Hey, Bryan.
Mickey, how are you? Happy New Year.
Yep, Happy New Year to you. And for our audience, a friendly reminder, anytime you want to learn more about runlifetoday.org is the website to go to. We brought these conversations to all of you just to share some stories, some inspirations from business members, volunteers, teams, and businesses on how they get more out of life versus letting life run them. Sharing some practical tips, but we also know there's no exact formula or science. It's kind of an art that you learn over the years, and I imagine Bryan's going to agree with that to some degree. But we're happy to be here today and ask some questions. So let's get going. Bryan, I know you've been on the road, so let me just say thank you for making time, squeezing this conversation in.
Sure.
So the best thing you've done since January 1st, let me just start with that. What would you say it's been?
I spent most of my January the 1st, like I do pretty much every year, kind of going through my plan. I spend the fourth quarter compiling all my goals, and then January the 1st, I generally try and put them in some kind of readable format. Okay. They might not be readable to many people, but I can read my handwriting well enough so that it's in a place that I'll see it on a regular basis. And I kind of compile down pages and pages and pages of kind of random, kind of caffeine-fueled ideas that sometimes seem a little irrelevant in the light of day, and put them in one place where I can kind of glance at them on a regular basis. So, and nice. Yeah, so the goals almost always the 1st of January, the end of December, I take some time. And this year it was the 1st of January, and I spent most of my day, rainy day, just kind of putting all that together and putting it on paper.
Yeah, that helped us stay inside on January 1st, if I recall. I think it rained 12, 14 hours that day.
Yeah, it was a mess. Believe me, it was a good day for a hot coffee and if you didn't stay out too late the night before, I got out early for a walk. I was down at the coast, and then the rain started coming. So
good. So Bryan, you and I have known each other for quite a few years, and I tried to think earlier this morning, when I first met you, and I think it was early 2000s when I was at the bank. Hanging out with Michael Wilson, and I think we were talking to you at the time, and the business that you owned at the time, and so I know you, but for our audience sake, I want to kind of go back a little bit just for foundational purposes, if you will. And in today's world, I can stalk you, research you, but tell me a little bit about just the family background, where you're from originally, maybe some siblings. Sure. About the family, and then we'll jump into your education and career and fitness and all that stuff.
Okay, so I'm a Tallahassee native. I have 4 grown children. My children were 9th generation North Floridian, mostly by default to my wife. All graduated from Leon High School. They were 5th generation going to Leon. And I grew up, Blessed Sacrament, Leon High School, Florida State. Couldn't wait to get out of town, moved to Aspen, Colorado for 2 days after my last final at Florida State. And I was a ski bum for a couple of years in the early 80s, and came back, took a job with IBM, really kind of just as an OPS part-time job, because I'd already graduated. I was getting another degree, and I thought I need to do something other than work in restaurants and do something with my business degree, and ended up taking a full-time job with IBM and spent probably just about 10 years with IBM. Left in the early 90s, started a medical equipment company with a friend, went on, built that. We had 7 offices in 2 states at one point. We grew it fast, made the Inc. 500, learned a lot of good lessons, hard lessons. Some of the business information I'd gotten at IBM applied. Most of it didn't, because frankly, working for a Fortune 100 company versus a startup, there's a few differences there.
Maybe around resources, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which was the reason I was talking to the banks. So it's, but it was a great run. And then, I've been pretty involved in the community because I feel strongly this is how you give back. And I got to a point in '06 where I had my children, most of whom had not headed off to college yet. So I still had teenagers, and I found my responsibilities serious. Just I had a collision of responsibilities going away. I brought some partners into my business. They asked me to stay as the president and the largest shareholder, but they said, we only need you 10 hours a week. Okay. I'd been president of my men's club here in town, which met every Friday. I rotated off that. I was chairman of the chamber. I was rotating off that. I was sat on a board of a for-profit company in the Midwest where I had some international travel. I term limited out on that. It was just kind of weird compilation of or collision of events that took my work week from a 70-hour work week to a 20-hour work week. And I looked around and said, I'm too young and not financially capable of retiring yet, but how do you give back? And so naively, I stumbled along and said, well, I'll run for public office. How hard can it be?
Okay. So, how hard can it be? Now
I got a tough lesson my first few months.
Yeah.
I won the county commission seat
Hmm.
in a very contested race in '06. And then literally, I realized how little I knew about the job. I guess from the outside looking in, I had said, well, I've sat on more complicated boards. I've done all this volunteer work over the years. How hard can it be? Well, in your local government, you've got people that vote for reasons that sometimes aren't quite as clear as they should be. Some are political, some are otherwise. So I stumbled down the street to the local state association. We're lucky being in the state capital that the associations are there.
Mm-hmm.
And said, help me out here. I'm struggling to get my arms around this job. And little by little, I got engaged with them, got on their board, and then ultimately served in leadership on the Florida Association of Counties and was their president. And it was a 5-year run in leadership leading up to and being president. It was a chance of a lifetime. And
so you just, in a matter of 10 minutes, I mean, you just went through I have questions prepared. I don't have to anymore.
Well, bring them on.
you just went right from, birth to county commission like that. No, I appreciate it, but I do want to unpack a little bit here and there, right? But for all the things you just shared, or one reason, again, that I wanted to interview you, right? Because you've done some inspirational things, right? And we haven't even touched on the impact of the community you've made. We haven't even talked about your hobbies and how extraordinary you've been in some of those hobbies, so along with your business life and your county commission life. So let me go back real quick though. Your interest in finance and business at FSU, where'd that come from?
So I went to the business school at Florida State. I will tell you the best teacher I have ever had in my life, bar none, was John Lewis, who was still pretty active in our community. He started Superlube. I took his class, real estate principles class, my sophomore year. And for the first time, all that math that they gave us in high school that they said, oh, you're going to need this one day. Well, it became apparent why. And things like time value of money and what a balance sheet looks like and what an income statement looks like. Really, I went from a BC student at best to an AB student overnight. And I give John a lot of credit. Dr. Lewis, he inspired me to kind of engage.
So IBM, now, is that why you and Steve Evans get along well, or?
Steve was my trading area manager. Yeah, I spent about 10 years. I started off in the administrative side of the house, just support, contracts, receivables. And then about 4 years into it, I went to the trading area manager. And I think it was Steve, now that I think about it. And I said, I love the job. I'd love to have a chance at going through and learning the sales side of the house. And so I spent a year going through sales. I was president of my sales school, and I had to go through a bunch of training about, how IBM, their sales process works. And then I came out and worked on the sales side of the house for 4 or 5 years. And it was a great run. IBM was a great company, treated me great. And it was, but big corporation. I didn't feel my ability. Once I got over the initial shock of, I don't guess I'll be president, which was my early goal. And, it's nice to have aspirational goals. It's also nice to have realistic goals.
We hear that a lot, right? Um, so then when you got to a startup company, right? You want to start a new business. So much today, and again, especially in a college town, you hear how much focus that is now. Startup businesses. We got Domi Station. We've got a College of Entrepreneurship at FSU. So knowing what you know about starting a business back then and what it's like today, what are a couple of those differences? What was it like back then versus today?
So, having worked at IBM, I thought I knew the sales side of the house well enough. But the problem is, you from a banking background can appreciate this, Mickey. It's a cash is king, and being able to cover your bet. And in my case, I had 1 year, I went from 15 to 50 employees, which sounds sexy until you've got to figure out how to cover the payroll. People would tell me at cocktail parties, boy, it must be nice you own your own company. And I used to laugh quietly and say, why don't you come around on payday and you can help me figure out how I'm going to do this dance? But in all fairness, part of my advice to a lot of people would be, you got to figure out how you're going to manage the cash flow, and you got to manage your growth based on what you can afford to do. And in my case, I way outstripped it and learned some tough lessons. I got through it. But it was tough to try and figure out how do you do this dance. I love small business. I sat on, when Karen Beck Dudley became the dean of the business school, I sat on her board for about a decade. And I love watching small businesses, flourish and prosper, but it's tough. I have a lot of appreciation for anybody who has been in the trenches and really done it. And I've said openly a number of times as an elected official, between the city commission, the county commission, and the school board in Leon County, we have about $2 billion or $2 billion worth of your tax dollars being spent. And I think when you look at the makeup of a lot of the elected officials, there's very few that have actually made a payroll or, risked any of their own money or hired and fired anybody. So not that that's a absolute to run as an elected official, but it frankly gives you a little bit more understanding and money doesn't fall out of the trees. You can't, every program that comes along is not a good program. And, sometimes you have to figure out how to raise taxes to make ends meet. And those are tough decisions that very few people want to make. So.
Yeah, being a banker years ago, and then running a couple organizations and having my own business, there are certain seats that I can be comfortable in versus others, and I think it's relevant. And with my clients that I help now, I think you just touched on something. There is no science perfectly to tell you when you need to grow your staff, right? And we always talk about the teams start to come apart a little bit. I know there are some formulas that people talk about, look at your revenue and look at this but it's also a feel. As a CEO, you got to have a good feel and a pulse on the business to know when your team members are too stretched, not stretched enough, or it's too late. So it's an art, and having been in that seat, I can see where you were advantageous to be on the county commission because of that reason. So do you miss owning business? You don't own one anymore. It's been a while.
No, I sold my medical equipment company about 6 or 8 years ago. I'm passively involved in a number of businesses, but I miss the day-to-day camaraderie with a lot of the employees. I don't miss the stress and strain of, when it was good, it was really good, but when it was bad, it's tough, and making a payroll and trying to keep things going. And I've still got a number of what I would consider lifelong friends that were people that were employed by our company and still are in many cases. So it was a good run, and I was, worked out.
And now it's a part of AeroCare, right? Out of Orlando.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So obviously, there's business. So we talked a lot about business, which is also county commission. And, you, again, thank you for your service to the county.
Thank you.
Years. A lot of accomplishments there, but to keep it direct and brief, I'll just say, what are maybe one or two of your favorite things about that job or accomplishments? And then if you want to share one that was your least favorite, tell me what that is too.
So I look at things like Cascades Park, which came on, the Joint Dispatch, which came on when I was chair. In Cascade Park's case, it was designed initially to be a stormwater facility. One of the other commissioners, I think it was Commissioner Dozier, when we were going through the plans, we had originally put an amphitheater in there that would look a little bit like the one over by Harry's, small, clamshell. And if you've been by that one, doesn't get a lot of work, and it's just kind of a placeholder. And the performing arts idea for our community had kind of stalled. Well, we had tucked money away in with the Tourist Development Council for the performing arts, hoping that that would have come to pass. So we took a couple of $1 million of money from performing arts and built the amphitheater that we have today in Cascades Park. And I'm really proud of what we did there. It's a world-class facility for a community our size. The other thing I'll say, which we've got about 700 miles of trails in our community. And Mickey, you're a big runner, but the mountain bikers are the ones who know where all of them are. The runners know where most of them are, but the majority of the citizens of our community have no clue. And when the pandemic hit last spring, I pushed real hard to make sure that we left all the passive parks open. They had to close down all the community centers and the playgrounds and the libraries and stuff where people convened, but the trail system out in our community. And what I found repeatedly from people, because they were forced to get out, was I didn't even know this existed. I have people that grew up here in town that maybe when they were training for something, somebody had mentioned Mixookie Greenway, and they'd come to me and just awed, saying, I never heard of this. And so I made it a point for a long time to try and profile different areas of our community. But what we find is the ability to move around the community, whether that's walking or biking or running, makes a huge difference. And that's a game changer for a lot of people. So the Cascades Park probably is the most visible. The trail system, though, is something that continues to grow. And I'm real proud of what we've done and continue to do there.
Nice. Yeah, no, I mean, you're not going to get a disagreement from me on that, because, I love it being out there on the trails. And I remember going to university cycles to get my bike fixed, and this was in probably April, May. So the pandemic was pretty new still. And the guy said, look, we can't find bikes, we're out of bikes. He said, we've never been this way. People in Atlanta are calling him looking for bikes because people were getting out, which, again, I'm not a fan of the pandemic, obviously, and COVID, but if anything, I've never seen so many people in Southwood walking, biking, running as I have in the last 6 months.
You could say the same thing is held true for kayaks, for motorcycles, for most boats in general. As you pointed out, bikes, any kind of outdoor related where you can get out and spread out has been wildly, they've been overwhelmed in the last 18 months. Yeah.
So speaking of outdoor, then let me transition. We talk business, right? We talk commitment to our community through your service as a commissioner, and again, leadership Tallahassee, Village Square Board, the Chamber Board. I mean, there's no doubt you've given back a lot of time and resources. So thank you for that. But now let me shift to the other side around the hobbies and fitness, because apparently over the years you fit in time to, I don't know, maybe climb a mountain or two and maybe do a 5K or an Ironman. So I mean, where did your interest start in the running and the walking and the hiking and all that stuff?
I literally started, we have one of the best track clubs in the country with Gulf Winds Track Club here with 1,500 members or whatever. And you know how it is. There's almost a race every weekend. So I started signing up for all the 5Ks and the 10Ks just to get my arms around them. And then on a whim, as a goal type of thing, when I was at IBM, I ran into a guy who referenced Jeff Galloway's book on running a marathon. So I said, I wonder. And he gave his example around setting goals. So I decided I wanted to run a marathon. So I ran the New York Marathon the week before I turned 30. I got through it. And then I've continued from there. There's a pretty active triathlon club here in town. I'm an okay swimmer. I'm a slow runner and a slow biker, but it gave me something to get out and spread out a little bit. So I started running some of the little sprint triathlons around town. And I started sitting down saying, what's could I run an Ironman? I don't know. Let's just see, is that doable? So I ended up running the full Ironman the week 10 days before I turned 50 in Panama City. And I've run 5 half Ironmans and 1 full Ironman. And, there's a number of people here in town that have run multiple Ironmans. I think that's a little bit of an insanity. I mean, there's a point at which it becomes overkill, because the training towards the end, at least for me, it was 25, 30 hours a week, give or take. And when somebody said to me in a moment of clarity, let's meet at the Books A Million at 2:00 tomorrow morning so we can get a 20-mile run in before we go to work, I thought, all right. And I thought that was okay. That seemed natural. And, now I look back on it and I think this is insanity. So I had a good time. The running community is a great community here, the triathlon community, the biking communities, and then I started, I really find getting outside and challenging myself with some travel is appealing to me. So I had a cousin in St. Louis who I've done some trips with. So we convened in Seattle, it's been probably 15 years ago now, and climbed Mount Rainier. We had done a couple of 14,000 foot peaks in Utah and Colorado, and, just day hikes, long day hikes. And we said, let's go do Rainier. And that was the first time I really, learned how to rope in and, deal with an ice axe and step across a crevasse. And the summit of Rainier is 14,000 foot and change. And you can see it when you fly in and out of Seattle. And then the group of us, there was 5 or 6 of us, we started kind of upping our game a little bit. We went to Africa and did Kilimanjaro. I've been to Mexico and done there's Popo, Ixta, and Orizaba. And I did Ixta and have tried Orizaba twice. On a guy's trip, we did Mount Fuji's a day hike, to a day and a half hike. And then I slowly started putting my eyes on something a little bit more larger, and I decided I wanted to do Denali. And I remember calling the people, this was after I'd run the Ironman, and I said, so, what kind of shape do I need to be in? They said, you need to be in the best shape of your life. And I said, I ran an Ironman, and they said, we don't care. and so I probably trained for 18 months for Denali. And there was a little bit of a hiccup midstream where there was a husband and wife guide team outside of Seattle that were going to be my guides. And she blew her ACL the first year. And then the second year she got pregnant. So I said, I can't stay in this kind of shape any longer. I was going in weekends at the county and doing 4, 5, 6 hours with a 50, 60 pound pack full of rice up and down the stairs. It was the only place I could go to, I tried it at the gym with the incline as high as it would go with a backpack on and a Kindle and headphones. And everybody wanted to know, what are you doing with a backpack on at the gym? Right. I would go out to Overstreet and some of the trails around here. And unfortunately, you look like a homeless person if you've got a backpack on your back while you're walking the trails. They think you're somehow living in the woods. Right. So I summited Denali. I went and did Denali in, we're 2021 now, probably 9 years ago now, I'm guessing, maybe 10. I'd have to go look at the calendar. 3 weeks on the mountain. I lost 25 pounds. 6 people died while I was on the mountain. I would tell you, it made the Ironman look like a 5K. I did what I would call almost an Ironman every day for 21 days. I slipped coming off the summit, pulled another climber with me. That was hanging on the side of the mountain, 11 or 12 o'clock at night with the wind howling at 18, 19,000 feet and saying every little Catholic prayer I know to try and get through this. It was a, gut check for me. And we got through it. We made the summit. And it was a life event. I would say it was the hardest thing physically I've ever done. And people say, oh, would you do it again? I said, no.
Why?
Yeah.
I remember not vividly, but a little bit on Facebook when you were sharing the story. I just remember reading, the things that you were, and I was like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't, to give you, for instance, I didn't have any sense of touch in my fingers or toes for about 4 or 5 months after I got back. So I came back, and a week later I had been asked would I do the commencement speech at Florida High. And so, you dress up, but you have to put a tie on. I had to get my wife to tie my tie for me because I had no sense of touch. My
Right.
face looked like a weed eater had gone across it. The inside of my mouth was sunburned. I mean, I've seen the pictures, and but it was an unbelievable experience. I went to Argentina about 18 months later, thinking I would do the largest in Argentina, which is Aconcagua. And I got about halfway up the mountains. This was early. I left right after Christmas, got up there early. I mean, we started the climb end of the year, and it was the first week of January. And I got pulmonary edema, and they helivac'd me off the mountain. So it didn't end the way I'd like it to have ended. And I don't know how much more of that I've got in the tank. We'll see. So
Still, I mean, and I hear a lot of success, but there's also failure, too.
sure.
And I wouldn't want, these series, these episodes, people thinking, oh, all you're going to hear is how great some people are. No, look, we all succeed and we all fail. It's relative in how much we let it impact us. But the
Yeah.
point here is you put the time and energy and the focus, and you use some of your tricks that you're going to share with us a little bit, maybe, to enable you to be, again, in so many different lanes of your life and still be able to succeed in some relative manner across most of those lanes. And I think, to me, that sounds like a fulfilling life. How do you do it all, right? So in my business, as working with business owners, when you're that CEO, which you've been, Bryan, you have to be cognizant of all the lanes of the business, but then you add on your personal life. So we hear work-life balance. Ooh, how do we get work-life balance? And whether I'm a fan of Bezos with Amazon or not, I do like the fact that he said, to him, work life is more of an integration than it is a balance. And I agree with that, because I think there's never a perfect number. It's figuring out how we can make them all work together across each other if we need to. So what would be your suggestions, if I'm a startup business owner, or if I'm somebody that wants to get into something other than work? I want to start exercising, I want to do other things. What are some best practices that have worked for you in being able to integrate so many different aspects of life?
Okay. So I would tell you, when I was at IBM, they took a class for a day, and they ran us through this. And I will tell you, for me, it was transformational. They gave us a little book called Get Control of Your Time in Your Life. And it basically took you through some simple goal setting exercises. And there's the old story, and I've told this because I've kind of taught classes along this line. And how many people have goals? Everybody has goals, and then you say, how many have written goals? That it gets thins the air a little bit, and then you say, well, how many have written time specific goals and measurable goals? And now you've suddenly leaned it out. And generally what happens is it's a 5% of the general population. And, like I said, everybody has goals, but their goals are, I want to be rich. And when you dig underneath a little bit, it's, I'm buying lottery tickets. There's no substance there. So, so for me, having a set of written goals is probably the baseline to start with. And my goals correspondingly over the years, whereas I started for the first, if I look back in my 20s, and I've got a file I keep, the goals would start with, what are my financial goals? What do I hope to accomplish earnings wise? What do I hope to be worth? Those type of things that you can tangibly look at. They're now at the bottom of the pile in the goals I have today. If I showed you my goals today, the first section is faith, the second section is family, and the third section is friends. My physical part's in there, my career part's in there, but financial is on the bottom now. And I'm also at a point where it's a little less important than it was as far as making, paying the bills and things like that. But for those people out there that want to accomplish something, I will tell you, I would never have accomplished a marathon, an Ironman, Denali, or making my company an Inc. 500 without having had a goal that I sat down and looked at. And it's wild-eyed, crazy, like big, hairy, audacious goal kind of thing. You looked at it. There's also a great visual somebody showed me at one point where, you're the center of the spoke of wheels, and you've got these spokes that go out. And if you measure yourself and you say, how am I doing physically? How am I doing financially? How am I doing faith-wise? How am I doing family-wise? And oftentimes what happens is you sacrifice your family because you want to grow your business. And there are going to be times when you have to certainly put your shoulder to the wheel, or you've sacrificed your business because you want to spend time with your family, and there's a trade-off. But the problem is, if you look at them as spokes on a wheel, the wheel doesn't run very smooth. When you got one, you would give yourself a 2 out of 10, and one you would give yourself a 9 out of 10. So it's a matter of finding some kind of ability to, balance them out, and some ebb and flow, like I pointed out. So.
No, I'm with you, obviously, from a goal setting standpoint, but writing them down. And what's the favorite cliche? Goals are only dreams if you don't write them down, right? If you can find some consistency with a lot of those spokes, that wheel will turn a lot better. Bryan, again, thank you for the time that you've given us, and I'm sure our audience is going to get something out of this interview. And so thank you very much. And I want to say again, condolences to you on the passing of your father recently. I know he meant to you. He's a very generous man in this community. I know that, as you are. So thank you for being here today. As always, Run.Life.Today.org. Check out the website. Our social links are there. And remember, do what you can. Give it your best effort in running more of life than letting life run you. Bryan, I'll see you again soon.
Good luck with the Ironman. Take care. Thanks, Mickey.
Thanks. See you, buddy. Take care.
See you.